Coming up this week on Review Ed, we have the big story for the week. No, sues Cengage. The startup sues the 600-pound gorilla. Why Pearson, speaking of big publishers, why Pearson should build its own tablet. A little discussion on that. Talking about, again, the effects of Apple's new efforts with their iPad and the actual costs, which are really, we find, remarkably high for the textbooks they're putting into schools. Also talking about textbooks in math textbooks and the challenges of actually getting content produced that's good and usable. Talking about Samsung and their tablets and their efforts to bring a content ecosystem to the Galaxy Tab. And then also looking then at Clemson University and their new efforts with Dell to start looking at social media and do something a little more interesting there than just Facebook and Twitter. And talking about Udacity, we've got a lot on tap this week. So looking forward to talking to you on Review Ed.
This is Review Ed episode 17, recorded February 24th, 2012. Begun the e-textbook war has. This episode of Review Ed is brought to you by LanguageLab.com, bringing the world of English to you. We all know the best way to learn a language is to be in a place where everyone speaks it. LanguageLab.com offers total immersion in English City, a 3D virtual platform where students from over 90 countries learn English online with highly qualified native speaker teachers. English City is open day and night, 7 days a week. Discover uniquely designed courses for general English, business English, oil and gas, and aviation English. Go to corporate.languagelab.com. Hey everyone, it's Friday again and time for Review Ed. We made it up to episode 17, yay! Christopher, as always, is by my side. Christopher Dawson, you should know him by now from his work over at WizIQ, where he does the business development, but of course also a regular contributing editor with very interesting articles, pieces on ZDNet. So as always, very happy to have you, Chris, and
very happy to be here.
Yeah, as you said in our little pre-show, we have a ton of stories, and I'd say let's start with the big story. No sues Cengage Learning over digital textbooks. The story is we will have an expert or legal expert on that matter a little later on in the show, but I think Chris and I are going to give our educational viewpoints on that. So basically, as Mashable had, I have to say, really nice scoop. I was surprised that not an education blog or publishing had this before. So what we learned from the article is that Cengage makes about 25% of No's textbook profits, which is already in itself a surprising fact for me that it's such a big chunk. And so what Cengage didn't like, as a side note, of course not so surprising, pro-SOPA, and so No has a feature called the Journal, which allows students to basically take apart in form of a journal or a note out of a textbook, and basically has the possibility to appear, let's say, somewhere on the web. And of course Cengage don't like that, as it's well, they are afraid about piracy, infringing copyright, and they gave No a 30-day period to apparently modify or remove the journal, which No agreed to, and according to the Mashable article, they worked on that. But finally, Cengage said no, so we don't want to be in a business relationship or relation with you, No, anymore. And yeah, basically now No is suing Cengage for breach of contract.
Right.
And hard for me to say. I mean, as they state, it's such an important chunk of their revenue, so they could basically not or hardly continue operating. On the other hand, Cengage, well, they are present on the various textbook platforms and, for example, Czech as well.
Right.
And of course, you cannot force somebody to absolutely stay on a platform. So what do they want to sue for? That Cengage didn't give them enough time to remove the journal, or now said, well, we want to pull out of the contract. So in my opinion, the maximum No could get out of that is that Cengage has to continue the contract up to its normal,
for some
like,
period of time, right.
Yeah, what they agreed on previously. But basically, I see it if Cengage really want to pull out, they can, right?
Yeah, well, I full disclosure, I'm writing a book for Cengage, so just to put that out there. But I hadn't realized actually before they approached me about writing a book for them that they are the biggest player in higher ed textbooks. And so it makes sense they'd be a huge portion of revenue for any distribution platform. But I'm actually surprised that they have such a presence on these platforms when in fact they have their own, not in terms of sales, but they really have some pretty robust platforms for their own digital content. Whereas these platforms are essentially just converting paper content into digital. They've got, their Mind apps and Mind Tap and all these other things. So I think that this may actually go beyond the issue of piracy and into the realms of, well, we have No adding functionality now, which actually isn't all that far from some of the functionality that they have themselves on their own digital content. And, you're right. And as Mashable, very clearly pointed out, this is a major vulnerability in this particular business model. And until we can move away from these big publishers having so much sway over the industry, they're going to be vulnerable. And I think this is why Mashable picked this up, though. And we talked about this last week. The idea that education's big right now. This is the current bubble of interest. So. And the business of educational technology is particularly interesting to folks. So I think it makes sense that Mashable and other outlets outside of kind of our sphere here are going to pick up on this. But I don't think that No has a huge amount of recourse here, and Cengage certainly has deep enough pockets not to really worry about it. I hope, though, that No and Chegg and other platforms like this can look to diversify, so this isn't as big a deal for folks.
Yeah, I think relates a little bit to another article that after these big mergers and buyouts in the 90s, there are relatively few big publishers left. So all of these platforms need the few players left, and I think it also shows us how powerful the one is who has the content. It's nice to have the platform, and definitely the tools, and everybody wants to use these, and also lets the platforms make their profit and build their business on it as long as they like it. I mean, now it reminds me of the discussion we had with the note sharing. As long as it's small enough and you fly under the radar, everything is okay, and people, even the publishers, maybe tolerate things. But as soon as one of the big fishers now says, okay, so we really don't like your feature, and due to this, we won't give you our content anymore, and we know that you need our content, really shows how and what a powerful position these big publishers still are. And well, I mean, we have also talked a lot about the open textbooks and so on, but there's still this gap, so they haven't or they weren't able to catch up. And I mean, if the schools still say, okay, we use this and that Cengage textbook, So what do you want to do?
Right, nose out of luck, and unfortunately, I think that the sort of critical mass in the open textbook movement, it's not there yet, and we have a while to go. Writing a textbook is a labor-intensive, very difficult thing to do, and it takes a lot of time. And it's not a lot of people who have the time to invest in writing a textbook that is free. I'm wondering if it's time for some sort of hybrid business model, something that is disruptive to the big publishers, but still finds a way to give content producers reasonable compensation for what they do. I think these platforms represent the potential for that, but when until that takes off among the professors who are assigning the texts, that's there's a real vulnerability. So I'll be curious how this plays out, and I'm looking forward to Richard Santalesa's commentary here, really on the kind of the legal grounds and the legal basis for this, and the what recourse No actually has, and are they buying time or are they making a point? I'll be curious to see what he has to say. Welcome to a quick interview we were able to have with Richard Santalesa. Richard is a lawyer and tech journalist, and he's kind of gone the rounds on everything from Wall Street all the way on up to representing tech firms for his. Well, maybe he can tell us just a little bit about what you're doing currently with your firm and sort of where you stand in the tech world, and then we'll jump into a few questions about the No and related lawsuit with Cengage.
Sure, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope I can provide some perspective on these issues. As you mentioned, I started out as a computer programmer down on Wall Street, and transitioned after that to the computer tech journalism world, where I was editor at several different magazines, including my favorite was User back in the mid-'90s there. And I transitioned over to the law as I realized that more and more of the issues I was writing about had legal connections. And so now I'm an attorney with the InfoLawGroup.com. They're a virtual firm based across the United States where we serve clients of all sizes across the country. And I'm based here in our Fairfield, Connecticut office, where I specialize in info law, data security, traditional IP items like copyrights, and e-commerce and internet issues. So hopefully I can take a look at this case we're looking at and see what we can find out.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I would say so for our little education sphere, the No Cengage lawsuit is probably particularly interesting as it's the first somewhat big lawsuit around the relatively new e-textbooks. And I mean, we don't know the whole filing, so of course we probably have to be a little bit careful about some of the assumptions we make, but basically no, so the startup providing the textbook platform is suing Cengage, the content provider, for breach of contract. And well, it all seems to be around one of No's features, the journal. And I don't know, what do you think, Richard? Do they have a case here? Because I assume the journal feature was known to Cengage before. So do you think No basically sues for indemnification due to this 30-day repair period or period No was given by Cengage to change something, and then Cengage said, no, we don't have a contract anymore? Or do you really believe No has a case here that, well, they have at least to go, or Cengage has to go on with them for the originally negotiated period of the original contract?
Right. The devil is always in the details, and when I was reading through at least the news reports of this case, as you mentioned, there seems several different interlocking issues going on here, and I did try to find the complaint and court filings and up to the federal PACER system, where I had thought the case would have been filed and was unable to find any record of the lawsuit, at least in the federal system. So it would appear, based on that none was sued in state court, and I imagine that Sinatra will remove to the federal court at some point, or is in the process of doing that, if it is in fact claiming copyright infringement matters, given that the federal courts have exclusive jurisdiction over copyright cases. Of course, when you have a mixed case like this, where there's a copyright contractual breach situation and then ancillary copyright issues, it can get very complicated. But just to backtrack a bit, from what it seems, and of course we don't have the filing and we don't have the actual contract at issue, which makes it kind of difficult and renders a lot of what we're going to talk about speculative, assuming various facts are true. But given what was in that Mashable article that we all read through, it seems to me that there isn't really a clear-cut case of, at least initially, of contractual breach. So you have the contractual matters versus the copyright matters as two separate issues. If indeed the contract contained a 30-day cure period and no was taking active material steps to in fact address Sinatra's concerns in good faith, it would seem that they do have a fairly strong basis for contractual breach remedy. Now, of course, that again, it's speculation on my part, but from just stepping through, it seems like that would be viable. And then you have the copyright issue as well, which is really interesting because there's claiming that the journal system created a derivative work, and that is what it seems to be they're basing their copyright claim on. To me, that seems rather tenuous on several levels. And on a primary note, I know that several of the other ebook manufacturers offer a similar type of highlighting and annotation type of feature. And I remember this annotation feature being available way back when, in the early days of Mac, when there was hypercard books being done where you could annotate things like that. I don't recall any copyright issues arising from the use of such features. But I think that is kind of a preliminary look as to where we base it from. There's the contractual claim, and then there's the copyright claim. And depending on how the contract itself is written, will really hinge on whether the copyright issue is legitimate and viable.
Yeah, I think for Cengage, so normally all features are part of the original contract, I suppose. So I'm a little bit surprised that Cengage makes this the part to think of renegotiating or maybe ending the contract with no. I think the problem is probably not so much for them the highlighting itself, but that the journal feature, which is apparently one of the most attractive features No has to offer, also in comparison to some of the other publishing platforms, that this feature allows the student to extract or potentially extract parts of the textbook and then make this in some way public on the internet, so that their Cengage seems to see that they are giving away their intellectual property for free, that the first student allows other students to multiply and then to distribute, and the part of the textbook makes its rounds on the internet, rather than simply having something highlighted and it stays on their computer or laptop or tablet device.
Well, that kind of begs the question then, though. Does No have any real responsibility to protect this copyrighted content that might possibly make its way around?
Well, then I think we get into the issue of fair use and how much of the content they can actually extract and post and for commentary and such. Obviously, if they're posting or extracting the entire work and then posting it up for additional student discussion or commentary, then there's certainly problematic issues raised there. But if it's, let's say, a few sentences out of an entire textbook, where one concept is being highlighted that the class is maybe discussing or the student is putting up there for additional elaboration from the classmates, it may, depend on how it's created, be a derivative work or kind of infringement matter, but it may also very well be a fair use claim. And historically, students and papers and have discussed works and textbooks, passages since the first universities back in Bologna. So I think Cengage's claims have, at least from what I know, have a bearing and a root of truth. But I'm not quite sure how it's going to play out in terms of, A, how students are using it with this journaling feature, and B, what efforts No was taking to ameliorate and address Cengage's concerns. So that will be for the courts to resolve it and to find out. And it's certainly a case that I think we'll be watching carefully. I expect it to settle, really, and not come to trial, given how long it takes these type of cases to wind their way through discovery and the whole federal copyright system, not federal copyright system, copyright cases in the federal court system. So we'll see. But I think you do raise a very good point as to, does No have any responsibility to protect copyrighted content? Well, they do have a responsibility not to allow the entire work to be reproduced, depending on what the contract says there, and what copyright license they're actually granted. But in terms of excerpts like this, I don't think they have a direct responsibility to prevent items like that from occurring. And I'm sure, as Kirsten mentioned, Cenage was aware of this feature during their contracting with No, at least of the existence of it. And maybe they didn't have a full grasp of the specific operation or points, but it certainly was incumbent on them to take a look as to how this worked in terms of the context of their work.
There's probably also this business acumen of No being a startup, and you, Christopher, talked with Osman Rashid, so the CEO of No, and myself as well, and at least in my talk he always pointed out how fast they are iterating, how fast they are adding new features. So I could assume that with Cengage that of course they have a contract, but maybe a more general one, not going into detail of every single new feature No might come up in the future, and that there is simply the startup on the one side and the established publisher who wants everything laid out and having the I don't know how to call it, but maybe doing business the old way, and simply reacting not so quickly and being slower and sort of wanting everything on paper to verify and to revise and so on.
Well, Richard, do you see this happen frequently when there's either partnerships or things that happen between kind of the larger, very established businesses. I mean, Cengage is kind of a giant in higher ed publishing, and then startups which are just inherently have this kind of different culture of perpetual beta as things move forward quickly. Do you see these sorts of things happen relatively frequently in the industry?
Oh, they happen all the time. I know of many cases where a larger established, slower moving company takes months and months and months for something to be decided and then come back down. And by the time it has been decided, either the market has outpaced it or the item has already been addressed in some fashion via an update or new code features. This happens all the time in my experience, and it does lead to challenges in contracting on items like this and many technical issues, where you initially try to envision and foresee all of the specific items that will occur during the contract period, and of course you can't see all of them, and ideally you give yourself a viable and specified mechanism for modifications and for addressing items that come up. And maybe they have here. I mean, again, we don't have the contract to review or any of the potential schedules or IT provisions in there. So we can't really say how they were addressing them. But I do see the overall issue coming up time and time again where there is a quite divergent activity and loop as to making decisions between a small startup, which by definition is much more nimble than a large conglomerate. So there is a disconnect in many cases like that.
Well, for more, there's lots of companies that are heading into this industry, the
Sure.
textbook, e-textbook publication and hosting industry. So they're mostly startups. So are there some words of advice or legal agreements or sort of loopholes or ways that other companies, can avoid some of these problems in the future?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, right? I guess one of the real items that I think helps to address this, and it's not even a legal or a contractual issue, is the business teams on each side, how stable they are, and how much of a personal relationship one team has with the other. I know in companies where there's either a big turnover in the team that you're dealing with, or in a small startup where there may be turnover, and you suddenly have someone who you have no relationship with that you're trying to address items. They don't know the history of the parties or the contract. So really, from a practical standpoint, is stability on each side, and at least in terms of the teams that are working on this contract and working together to build a relationship. From a legal standpoint, you really want to almost have separate contracts, separate items that address payment items, IP ownership, etc., and then separate statement of works or schedules or what have you, amendments that address the usage of matters in the specific platform and how they will be addressed, and regular reviews of those. I think what happens a lot of times is that the contract is signed, put in a drawer, and people forget about it until someone spots some sort of problem. Then they go back and look at the contract. But in items like this, where there is a fast-moving market, where there is fast-moving technology, it really behooves both parties to specify that, every 30, 60 days we're going to get together, review what's going on so that each party has a clear sense of what the other is thinking and what they're doing. I think many cases, just keep that type of communication and cooperation going avoids a lot of problems like these that come up. I mean, I always hate to recommend litigation or launching a suit to clients, because that strikes me as a failure on the lawyer's parts to have gotten the contract right initially. And I like getting contracts right. So, and it's very expensive. As we all know, lawsuits take a long time. They're very expensive. Even if you win, it may be a very Pyrrhic victory as the market has completely sidestepped you, and you're left holding maybe a check for damages, but no advantage going out of the lawsuit that you wanted coming in. So I think those are just some of the practical items that I try to recommend to our clients who are acting in fast-moving businesses like the ones we're in here.
Yeah, this is actually the interesting point. So on the one hand, No is growing quickly, adding lots and lots of new textbooks. On the other hand, we learned from the article that only one publisher, Cengage, makes 25% of their revenue. And on the other hand, Cengage doesn't seem to be overly interested in continuing the business relation with No anymore, as they are basically also present on every other e-textbook platform. And I mean, I think No, maybe they don't need to be really afraid, but I think they have an interest to keep Cengage on their platform as a publisher. And so then is the big question, what can they sue? So do they want indemnification or do they want continuing the business relation, so the contract, as long as possible? What do you think, Richard?
Well, they wouldn't really be looking for indemnification at this point. Typically, although not always, indemnification provisions in a contract are for being reimbursed from third-party claims. So let's say somebody sued No for copyright infringement, and they potentially would seek indemnification for that third-party lawsuit. But I think what they really want is for the contract to continue, given that it is 25% of their potential revenue from what I've read there. And that's a big chunk of business for any company to have dry up overnight. I would think that they would want the contract to continue and hopefully work things out so that they can do it when the contract period is up.
So No reacted in the way that they didn't take the books down. So they only seemed to pour fuel or gas in the fire. So I mean, I don't think that this particularly pleases Cengage that their books are still up. They are selling, or No are selling the e-textbooks. I mean, Cengage makes money, but if they want that the books are taken down, No doesn't seem to. I mean, probably for their own survival, they are keeping the books up, and but it seems to even worsen the situation.
Well, that's a great point, and that highlights one of the items I mentioned when we started out as to the differentiation between the contractual breach and copyright infringement. The way, and that again boils down to how the license grants are provided in that contract that they have, and what copyright licenses Cengage has in its own in its own contracts with authors providing textbooks to it. Many times, courts will, in situations like this where potential copyright infringement is claimed and one party says that a breach of the contract also terminated the copyright license, many courts are really loath to buy into that sort of thinking on an overall scheme. If you want the copyright license to terminate upon any breach of the contract itself, or claim the breach, the court's going to want you to make that very clear and express in the contract itself. And some may even at that point be loath to enforce that way you would want if you were the party seeking that infringement claim. So they will look at the contractual breach item and then the copyright infringement issue separately. And I don't see it as out of the ordinary for No to continue to keep the books up there at this point, given that they're the one that initially brought the suit for contractual breach by Sinai. It really is in their, it makes sense for them and supports their position by keeping books up there, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we don't have all the details, so I'm speculating and just trying to draw some general analysis and conclusions from what we do know. But I don't see the fact that they're leaving the books up there as being either shocking or potentially out of the ordinary, and it's definitely understandable.
Right. So well then, just one last question then. More generally, I mean, the issue of DRM and fair use and all this sort of stuff that we've sorted out quite handily in the paper world continues to plague the e-textbook world, and I have yet to see a company that comes up with a particularly good solution for all of it, whether that's a mainstream publisher or a company that's making these resources available. In K-12, there's no good mechanism for sharing books, and as we talked about earlier in the webcast, this really has left Apple's efforts leading to much higher costs in higher ed. The secondary book market has kind of gone away, and there's a real incentive for students to actually just go out and purchase used paper copies of the book instead of take advantage of the inherent benefits of an e-textbook. So, is there a way forward? Do you know of mechanisms that are coming to fruition or coming to light that might make things a little better all around in terms of DRM in the textbook world?
Gee, I really wish I did, because if I did, I'd be a millionaire in short order. And if I did, I certainly wouldn't tell you, so it might be a secret. But you definitely hit the nail on the head in that there is so many problems or issues raised by the whole DRM ebook issue, not just in textbooks, but across the whole ebook issue. And on the one hand, it's very understandable from a author and publisher perspective that you want to be able, given how easy and quick and immediate it is to make a copy of an ebook, why you want to be able to forestall some of that from a business perspective. And on the other hand, though, you mentioned the items of limitations on sharing books and the ability to have a secondary market in ebooks, which is a real mainstay of at least the paper book publishing market. May not put money in the author's or publisher's hands, but we're all familiar with shopping at library book sales or secondhand bookshops, and I've gotten used to that. And that's also supported by the copyright first sale doctrine, where after the first sale, it's a complicated area, but essentially after the first sale, all bets are off as to where that work can go, at least from a contractual limitation standpoint. So it is a very issue and an area that I'm not sure anybody really has the perfect solution right now. And it's still trying to be hashed out by each side as each side has legitimate features and claims and items that they want and items that they want to protect. But the secondary book market, specifically in education and in higher ed, is it's a very important one. I remember when I went to law school, I would always try and get the used textbooks, because those things would be $200 a pop kind of thing, and used books, although still expensive, were a lot cheaper. And if you eliminate that item completely, it certainly doesn't help students, particularly in this market and the way that tuition costs have risen over the last few years and continue even in this recessionary time. So the short answer is I don't see a silver bullet for the whole DRM or textbook issue. And I think it's really going to eventually be an open-ended time frame work itself out into what users are willing to put up with and what publishers feel they can get away with. And somewhere in between those two spectrum points is where both sides will gain some level of comfort. I think we will lose some items that we've become accustomed to in the paper-based book and publishing model world. But at the same time, as these features like journaling and other items come to the fore and gel a little bit, there is a benefit to users as well on that. I think some of the troubling issues, though, is areas like, for instance, way back, what was it, a year or so ago when Amazon removed copies of books from people's Kindles without really being aware of it. And there is the issue of just what extent DRM gives you control over what's on somebody's ebook reader and how you can share items like that. I mean, I do believe there must be at some point a mechanism for sharing ebooks effectively and securely, and we're certainly not there yet, and it's certainly not easy to do so at this point. I know my own local library here makes ebooks available for download in a variety of formats, which is great. I mean, I download a lot of books that way, but they do have a pretty strong DRM system in place. They're only able to offer a certain number of copies for download. Those copies expire after a short period of time, so you really have to be willing to read the book quickly before it disappears from your reader. So it really is an area and a market and a technology in great flux, and I'm not sure I have the crystal ball for it, and I'm not sure anybody really does at this point.
That was a great analysis, Richard. Thank you very much. Richard Santalesa of the Information Law Group, providing some commentary both on No and Cengage, as well as just this whole e-textbook debacle in general. I guess the key takeaway is startups get a good lawyer. Maybe Richard is available for hire.
Available.
Yeah, Richard. Thank you for your conclusions and analysis. And as Christopher pointed out, where can people find your work online, and how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Thanks. This has been a really fun and interesting, and I enjoy hashing items like this out. People can find me online at infolawgroup.com, which is our main website there. And if they want to reach me directly, it's rsantalesa@infolawgroup.com. It's my email. And I respond pretty quickly.
Yeah, and also very actively on Twitter, as I saw just yesterday.
Oh, yeah, I'm a little out of control on there a bit sometimes, but yeah, very busy.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks so much, Richard. Have a great day.
All right, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Another interesting article around traditional math textbooks currently makes its rounds on, or at least in our sphere of the educational internet. It's on open.salon.com, and the author basically describes from a few years back how it was like writing a math textbook, and now the few remaining publishers rivaling with each other and putting pressure on the authors to deliver more quickly, and to basically, yeah, they seem to have a huge competition. And I mean, writing a math textbook in 5 weeks sounds really almost impossible. And then she also talks about the difficulties then having the some labor in India, I think, who the people who type the textbook, and the difficulty in communication. So I think I put this article in the show notes, but if you want to read an interesting piece how our textbooks are being produced today, you shouldn't miss on this article. And I mean, it's probably only a time until this comes to the e-textbooks then as well.
Of course, and in fact, perhaps more so. I mean, once you move to electronic distribution, there's even more pressure to turn things around quickly, update quickly, and get things out there. And no, I read this article with a lot of interest, and I think that it also again points to the need for a change in the way that we teach mathematics. And there's some progressive looks at this, but when it comes down to it, most 95% of people out there are still using this sort of kill and drill approach to teaching math, and you're going to get lost in the drivel and the busy work of these books, when in fact you could be doing something really interesting with mathematics and maybe getting away from this very problem that we're having, and have something that's a little more timeless, doesn't need to be cranked out every time there's a new standard that gets added to the Common Core.
And well, if you're listening, and of course if you're watching, I think from the first two stories you already got our big topic for today, so textbooks, and more specifically e-textbooks. Then there is another story. Lee Wilson, President and CEO of PCI Education, with more than 20 years of experience in the industry. So he sat down and he compared Apple's new efforts of the either iBook author or basically what textbooks on the iPad cost compared to print, and he came up with shocking
numbers.
Yeah, shocking numbers. So breaking it down to a student, we basically end up with an iPad textbook costing 5 times more than a textbook in print. Obnoxious numbers as well.
Just terrible. And even if you can actually get into the numbers, and there's a spreadsheet you can download them and play with some assumptions. And even if you switch to some very conservative assumptions, giving every benefit of the doubt to these e-textbooks, you're still coming up with numbers that just don't make sense for schools that are cutting staff and have funding cuts facing them, and they are supposed to be doing, again, as always, more with less. That's the whole point of these textbooks, is to make them more easily accessible, more readily accessible, more interactive, better, cheaper, faster, more. And what do we get? We get Apple's typical 5 times the cost.
The typical.
I was finally able to get down to twice the cost, and that was making some sweeping assumptions about ways you could do this better. And it still doesn't. Nobody has still addressed the issue of licensing all of this. Even just the costs, kind of the soft costs that we can't really quantify very well of managing now licenses. When you go to the book closet and wheel 30 books down to a classroom, there's no license management there. There's no thought to how that works. You just make sure that there's enough books so you can move them around classes. Done. And I'm not advocating for that approach, but I am saying, there's now a new layer of management for school IT staff and then school administrators that now think about something that's way outside their sphere of or their area of consideration.
So we put this in the show notes as well. If you are in a school or somewhat involved with textbooks and you want to make the math for yourself and sort of verify what we say or what he said, you can go on the site and basically then get in touch with him, and he'll send you the spreadsheet, and you can figure this out by yourselves, putting in the specific textbooks you have, and then compare it with the versions available on for the iPad. Okay. So I was leaning maybe a little bit out of the window, but not so much in my opinion when you think about what I said about just before about content being king, Pearson being one of the most powerful publishers these days and spreading into a lot of verticals in the education industry, and sort of I think we have arrived at a point where they could learn from what other people have built, and on the technical side, on the other hand, they bring with them a ton of money, basically. So why not building their own dedicated tablet and hand it out along with their textbooks to schools? Maybe even subsidized like Amazon does with the Kindle Fire. And even if they make a certain loss on every tablet, still the schools need to buy their textbooks, and they could make a big profit out of that. Do you think that's somewhat...
I agree with you 100% on this, and Pearson remains the 600-pound gorilla in all of this, and yet they've been singled out a number of times recently by pretty progressive folks in educational technology as being a company that's really trying to innovate, and they've done some pretty cool things that have actually dropped some costs a bit, and have trying to save schools money, trying to save educators and students money. I think that we've had lots of conversations. I've written lots about ecosystem, and they have the ecosystem. They have the right partners. They have the right content.
Even if you want the free LMS,
and all these things could pretty easily be integrated into a tablet. There's more than enough sort of emerging, like white book tablets. We're hearing about them coming out of China now. These things that are going to be cheap. You're absolutely right. They could subsidize them and subsidize the content, bundle content. If it was me, if I was Pearson, if I ran Pearson, we'd have our own tablet.
Yeah, Amazon hasn't been a traditional hardware manufacturer, and we could see how quickly they came out with the Kindle Fire, and I think, a lot of Technorati or iPad users probably rightfully so said, well, it's not the same experience, but for $200, a lot of people are pretty happy with what the first generation of the Fire.
I love my Fire. I love my Fire.
See?
Yeah,
So,
it does what I needed it to do in this context. And no, it isn't as rich as the iPad, but it's a pretty fine device, and it's $200. It's their number one selling item. And I think for good reason. And they're, even though they lose, $30 a piece on each one they sell, how many people buy, that's three books. The day you get it, you download 3 books and you're done. They've made up their money. It's a great value proposition for them, and it puts tablets in a lot of hands. It gets people reading, and you can subscribe. You have all of the same general functionality as your iPad at a fraction of the cost, with direct access to an app store that's really quite good, arguably better than Google's own app store, and to content is really quite incredibly extensive. Amazon is not my favorite company in the world. Their DRM is just, it turns my stomach. But you don't notice me not using my Kindle Fire or not using, downloading books frequently and browsing on it. And I've got to say, the Silk browser on the Kindle Fire, it is fast. It works. They're leveraging the cloud. I've said for a long time they need to use this infrastructure to develop next generation educational applications that run out in the cloud and stream right to you. We're already seeing this with the released. Not the OpenView desktop. What's it called? Basically the desktop streaming to your iPad. Everything's happening out in the cloud, and it streams to your iPad at high performance. The same thing can happen with the Kindle Fire, and the same thing could absolutely happen with Pearson content that all of a sudden gets very engaging, hosted out in the cloud, an inexpensive, basically thin client tablet. You're spot on this. So we'll see.
And
maybe they'll take our advice.
Yeah, somebody. Oh, I hope. Maybe would be interesting to see. I doubt that Pearson is listening, but who knows?
If anyone's there,
we'll
take just a tiny fraction of the profits.
1%.
That's it.
Yeah. So another company who wants to throw their hat into the ring and education somebody who for some time now has a particular fight or rivalry with Apple is Samsung, and I mean patent wars. So Samsung want to announce on the what's it called, the Mobile Congress, I think, Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in just about a week, a what they call learning hub for the Galaxy Tab. And that, of course, reminds us of, strongly, I guess, of the Apple iTunes U. Right. And, I mean, Samsung and Apple have this thing going on around the Galaxy tablets, so the specifically the 10.1, also the smaller one. And, well, I think it's worldwide, and sometime one gets an advantage in court and then the other one strikes back. So I think this clearly is that, well, Samsung want to establish their own sort of learning, well, hub system on their tablet. And I mean, I think I heard that the Galaxy Tabs are very popular as well, and I think for not few people this could actually be a good motivational factor to either buy a Galaxy Tab of the new generation, or I think would be something nice and additional to owners of a Galaxy Tab already. And I think you have at least one in your household, I think, Chris. So is it frequently?
I just had to return my. I just had to return my Galaxy Tab. Adobe loaned it to me so I could try out their new CS5 apps. But you know, of course, we have a Zoom and we have lots of other non-iPad tablets. But you know, I think that one of the things that has kept Apple at the top of the tablet game is simply they have the content, and you know, although no matter how much we rail against iBooks and the various things they've done in terms of textbooks, they still have been the ones to make the effort. And iTunes U is growing very quickly. They've opened it up to K-12 now. You know, it's a big deal. So to jump ship and buy another Android tablet when you are in the education game, it's a bit of a tough sell until someone steps in with something like this. I'm hoping and expecting that Google will do the same and really use that to kind of push Android forward. But for right now, Samsung's the only one in Android land really who's talking about this, at least from an OEM perspective. You know, I don't know if it will be enough, but I will say that among the current crop of Android tablets, the Galaxy Tab is I think the closest to the iPad in terms of sleekness and feel and prettiness. So if you're looking for a high-end device,
too much or too many similarities according to Apple in prettiness apparently. Yeah. So.
Even I can't disagree with that one. But you know, if you have $600 to spend on a tablet and you don't want to buy 3 Kindle Fires, then you know your choice really is the Galaxy Tab, the Zoom, or the iPad. And people are obviously picking the iPad in general. So. You know, I'll be curious to see if this gives them a bit of an uptick, but at least it's a gesture that I think is important, and it comes back to exactly our theme for today. Content is king, and if you pair the content with the hardware, with the ecosystem, you know, you've got the secret sauce.
Yeah, I think we will hear more probably next week or in 2 weeks after the announcement, and then, well, as it's or the rumors seem to become more and more precise, that we will see the launch of the new iPad 3 or 2S, who knows, but most likely on March 7th. So, and then I think we will see how the customer decides and what they decide for, and I'm pretty sure that a new iPad will be another big hit for or big success for Apple, but I mean,
Yeah.
why not? The market seems to leave enough space for other players as well, and I think that's a good thing that there is some maybe dominance when you want to say, so what is currently the best experience, and the others so far weren't able to catch up with Apple, even not to the iPad 2, and now we will most likely have a new version. However, I think what you pointed out, they can do a lot around content, and I mean, if $200 is the magic price point, why not? I mean, yeah, as you said, there's 3 iPads, so why not have
Yeah.
one, or give your kids a Fire or maybe a Nook as well. So
I don't let my
options.
2-year-old play with my iPad. She plays with my Kindle Fire all the time, and hasn't destroyed it yet. And she's really destructive. So if anyone could take it out, it's going to be her. So yeah, she doesn't get to play with the iPads though. And I must admit that I've already contacted Gazelle to get one of those iPads taken away, so that I've got some cash for the
Cash
iPad.
to for the new one.
Yeah, what am I going to do? Not get it?
We will hail, as always, hail Apple. Okay, let's take a quick break and thank our sponsor for this week, languagelab.com again. And, well, we all know when we want to learn a language, how important it is to be in a place where everybody speaks it. So may this place be the country to travel, but I mean, we unfortunately don't always have the time to travel abroad, so online a virtual city might be an option, and that's exactly what Language Lab offers. So their virtual city is situated in Second Life, called English City, and it's basically a 3D virtual platform where students from over 90 countries come together, and they learn English with, of course, qualified teachers, and these teachers are all native speakers. But, I mean, if you want to spend some your free time in English City, as I said, you can also connect and just hang out with your peers from many different countries and cultures, and have a chat in English, and this way also practice in a more informal environment. And, well, as it's on the internet, English City is open 24
hours
a day, 7 days a week. And, yeah, I think for a lot of people this can be, and certainly is, an attractive way to practice their general English, or also more specialized professional English. And of course we are more than happy to have them as a sponsor for our Review Ed show, and we want to thank them for their support. Great. Then there were maybe one more story. I'm sure you have a lot to, or you have some things to tell about this, and then we come to the stories that mattered most to you this week. So Clemson University and Dell launched a social media listening center.
Right, right.
So we all learned how important it is to listen, and not only to speak in social media. And well, I think, so at first I didn't really know what to think of that, whether it was really important or, well, just another thing. But when I thought a little bit longer about this, and also reflected on the emails I often get either from interns or also the social media managers from startups and companies in general, I think learning how to do social media well is probably not a bad idea, reflecting on some of the talks I have, or messages I
receive?
get.
Yeah.
So yeah, I receive. And I mean, we have so far always said, well, they are digital natives, they grew up using all those tools, so they should be better in social media than they are. And I think now we are sort of realizing that this is simply not true, and that probably our grandparents in their small towns and smaller environments were much better at social media than today's 20-year-olds or even some of the people in our generation. So yeah, then I thought it's maybe not the worst thing to get some education around social media and to see how to monitor and how to listen and how to use these tools in a higher education environment.
Well, I think we can look at our own skills when we hit college. We all grew up speaking. We know how to talk, but do you know how to speak in a professional business setting? There's a very big difference between having a conversation with a friend and then actually giving a public talk about something, or a sales pitch, or really being convincing or compelling in an argument. And the same thing translates to social media. Yeah, our kids are online 23 and a half hours a day, and they're nonstop. Facebook's always open. They're texting. They are social media. Do they know how to do it professionally? Do they know how to do it in a way that makes sense? I'm with you. The pitches I get from Gen Y and late Gen X marketing professionals, in quotes, they're horrific, and they're broadcasts, and that's the whole point of social media. It needs to not be a broadcast, and this is something that certainly with IQ we work on all the time. We have lots of these social channels coming in, but how do we manage that? How do we actually have a reasonable conversation with our users, not just for the purpose of making them buy with IQ or getting them on board with the product, but to actually engage with them, find out what they want, what they need, what can we do better. That's the tools are all there, the platforms are there, but our ability to execute on that is really hampered by just a lack of sort of preparation. I think the other thing to look at here is that Dell is an emerging player in the cloud and in their ability to deliver some pretty serious processing and services based on some recent acquisitions they've made. And, really they have the potential here to turn this into a think tank and a research institute that can really look at what's happening in the field of social media, allowing Clemson and other universities who replicate this model to be sort of at the forefront of emerging trends in social media, not just how to use it, but, hey, there's things happening here that bear our watching and our research and our understanding. I think that it's time that really social media became less of an art and a bit more of a science. And I think Dell stands a chance of being part of that. I had a conversation with Dell this morning about their some real significant advances they're actually making in terms of learning platforms, and not just Dell's own new LMS, but really they're taking this idea of services that bundle with education and bundle with the hardware they sell, and they're going way beyond just some simple value adds and into the realm of really doing something new and different. And I think this is just part of that overall effort. They're Dell is I'd love to call them the Pearson of educational hardware. They have they're the big company. They're huge in across the enterprise, but really they stand to bring a lot to the table, and actually have kind of shifted their mission to bring more to the table. Ultimately,
interesting, yeah. Because I heard that in terms of hardware, they were starting to struggle a little bit, and have to, as everybody, after some good years, there almost naturally comes a period of a little bit a downturn or at least stagnation, and you have to find new answers to what your customers really want or where they see value with your company. So it's interesting and good to hear that they have apparently found a new way into the cloud, and then also doing some innovative things in education. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think they're on the right track. So,
Mm-hmm.
so we'll see if they can continue executing and bring forward a lot of these things. But certainly, this project at Clemson is, I think, just one component of some very cool stuff happening at Dell.
Very interesting. So, some stories that meant a lot to you this week, Chris. What do you want to start with?
So we talked last week about Udacity, and I think the week before, the folks out of Stanford often doing their own thing. They saw they could be successful at Stanford, and in their offerings of online courses, and said, hey, we can be successful. Period. And actually now they have we heard on EdSurge that they've got over 70,000 signups for their introductory level CS computer science courses, building a search engine and programming a robotic car. So 70,000 in a pretty short period of time for some topics that are not exactly soft core, so to speak. So,
but I think that's actually probably part of this. I don't want to call this a hype, but it is those subjects. And I mean, we also talked a bit about Udemy, what makes them successful, and I checked that, and it's so the paid courses that appear to be the most popular are around those subjects, not necessarily computer science, but on Udemy as well, it's programming, business development, and design, who have who attract the most subscribers. And I am not sure if it's not like Udacity CEO David Stevens as well, those people who manage to attract a large number of students or customers. I'm not sure if those interested people interested in taking courses are per se on Udemy. I think it is more the teachers, like for Udacity as well, who attract them and bring them to the platform. And then it's just the platform where we brings us back to the content discussion, where our content is then delivered from, and not necessarily that it's the platform itself that is so attractive.
Right. If these guys went on to Udemy, then they'd have great followings there. Or if they
were
I think that,
on,
gosh, if they were on
else.
WizIQ, my life would be a lot easier, But I think that it is interesting when we look at their mission. They're much clearer in their mission about bringing affordable education to the masses. And what got me thinking is we've talked about this before, and I've had conversations with Andrew Rosen of Kaplan about this same sort of thing. This is the university's not dead, but it's becoming harder and harder to justify the cost of a university education when what you really need to bring to the table are skills and experience. And my oldest son decided to go to a local university, a state university, instead of going off to a high-end school that he'd been eyeing up. Yeah, he'd been eyeing up Manhattanville, and it was really expensive and very exclusive and just fit right into a sort of niche that he had in mind. And ultimately he said, look, it's a lot of money, and I can get what I need right here. I can commute to school. I can take some of my classes online. I can make this easy, and gosh, I can save, $125,000. And, that's probably true. And how much can you go beyond that, even with things like this, when perhaps you have a 4-year degree from someplace like a local state university, and you'd like to simply extend your skills. Well, the skills are more important than anything else. So the university is an institution. It's not dead. It's not going anywhere, but the value prop is waning.
As long as the universities have the credit system exclusively for them, and players players on the internet don't want to attack this, don't want to bother with it at the moment, because yes, it is very difficult. the real breakthrough for me would be when the first university says, okay, we have this course here online, and you get the same credit. If you take the course, you pass, you get the same credit. For us, it's not important if you did it online or in our traditional brick-and-mortar classroom. So,
right, and MIT is definitely headed down that road, offering certificate programs now through their open courseware. So
I think we see
it's
good
around the corner.
beginnings. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It is the question, and we touched on this point rather regularly, if it's in this generation already, how long it'll take until online undoubtedly offers and all those free alternatives, and it's great already for people who don't have the opportunity to get high-class education, and already also for the lifelong learners. There needs to be established a system that makes online learning equal to higher education learning certification as you get it at present day offline. And this is probably the maybe tragic or difficult point. When do the powerful players and the important voices say, we want this and we want to establish it, and now or quickly, or if they say, okay, we as public universities, we take our time, we make our money offline, and it's good, or at least it's to our in our interest the way it is for some more time, and when we think it's appropriate to make the transition, we are going to do that.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, it really this is what it comes down to. When do we reach a critical mass? I think we're a couple years away, but and you'll probably see it in the public universities to begin with. But it also has to be accepted by employers and by this overall establishment that puts so much value on higher education. Not to say it doesn't have value, but just to say that the technology, I think, has advanced beyond the institution. Mm-hmm. So we'll need to see what that means. But so in other news, just a couple other kind of interesting things. The U.S. Department of Education is actually reading Twitter now. There's a story on Yahoo News.
The
Department has been a little more high profile in the last couple of weeks as they've seen some increases in funding, as we've seen schools being having NCLB requirements waived by the administration. Obviously their role is changing a little bit, but they claim to be reaching out to teachers and educators and other businesses and users. They want to hear from you on Twitter, and they have a variety of hashtags. And I don't know. Twitter has caught on big time for business and PR, and but it's not caught on the way that perhaps it could have or should have in education. I don't know a whole lot of teachers who are doing a lot of tweeting.
Absolutely, it was all their dedicated hashtags and
exactly. That's not not really something we're seeing a lot in mainstream education, whether or not we should be. But it is one more way to actually see a bit of democratization. It got highlighted on U.S. News and World Report, and perhaps there's a bit of outreach going on here that's of value. But I do think that the takeaway from this is that the Obama administration is sort of pulling the Department of Education into the 21st century. There's definitely some movement in higher levels of the federal government here in the States to think a bit differently about education. Race to the Top was an effort to that effect. There's a huge number of tenets of RTDP that really bother me, but the effort and the intent probably quite reasonable. So I just thought it was an interesting bit of news, not so much for the fact that all teachers need to go out and start tweeting about everything that's wrong in education, but that the administration is looking differently at how it interacts with teachers and placing a bit more value on teachers, which is a good thing.
And it's a pretty easy and direct way to reach out, and often you have this with huge organizations, governmental or also in the private field, that you simply don't know how to get access, and it's very frustrating when your email gets from level to level, and it's almost certain or at a certain point you won't hear back, and it's just
diminishing returns. So it's
disappears.
not
And on Twitter, I mean, it's always a question how the account is then really maintained and moderated, but a much higher chance to directly reach out and maybe even get a good answer or helpful response. And
Right.
yeah, I think it's part of a new, I don't want to interpret too much into it, but a new approach also how government sees things and wants to use the possibilities technology and particularly the internet gives to engage with with its people.
Stakeholders.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is what it should be doing. So it's the whole democracy and stuff, Anyway, the last story I came across, there's it relates back to one laptop per child, and now they're starting to begin to talk of one tablet per child. There's some efforts ongoing in China, some pretty large expected and hopeful rollouts of inexpensive laptops, but one OLPC as an organization, they revealed it at CES their as we know their tablet prototype. But what was the interesting take on this was that Yves Behar, who is the guy behind these the Herman Miller chairs and some high-end, really successful design experiments, is actually behind a lot of the design elements of the new tablet, including its ability to charge, with a cover that charges it with solar power. Some really sort of innovative things that, no matter how anybody feels about OLPC and its efforts and business models, invariably these things trickle down and end up in the hands of students and teachers and educators all over the place. I mean, the entire netbook segment was really created by OLPC. So going back to our discussion of where tablets come in and where tablets happen, these content ecosystems, there's no reason that students shouldn't have solar-charged tablets that are inexpensive that they can jam in their backpacks. This is still a very reasonable ideal, whether you're in rural India or you're in the United States or France or wherever. So be curious to see when the trickle-down effect begins to happen. It took a while for netbooks to take off, but when they did, there was a real burst of interest in them before they exploded.
For a relatively short period, though, but they really exploded. And
they did. But I think they also, though, they ushered in this idea of the Ultrabook. And in fact, I think they ushered in the idea of the tablet. All of a sudden, people were comfortable with a smaller screen. And I think even though netbooks are by and large kind of by the wayside now, people are used to a 10-inch screen. That's okay to see your content on 10 inches. Now, it just doesn't make sense to have a keyboard attached to it. And I think, when we were moving towards larger and larger screens and higher resolutions, we needed to be sensitized to the cost effectiveness of something smaller. So I think that, as well as alternative operating systems. Windows ended up being the standard on netbooks, but at least for a little while, people were introduced to Linux, and they were introduced to something not Windows for performance and cost reasons. So I think the same is going to happen here, regardless of the ultimate success of OLPC or OTPC, one tablet per child. We're going to see some design elements and
maybe, as you said, maybe more the ideas, the creative input in general, and I can say for myself, why not look even for developed countries? Why always declare a solar charger as a thing for countries in development? I would like to have it. I would pay for it. I don't see why this is sort of get this this tag of, yeah, that's for the developing world, it's cheap and whatever. Anyway, I don't see any reason why not look into alternatives in some of the elements our tablets have or our ultrabooks have. So why not? I think this is very valuable and interesting input.
Agreed.
Apart from what you think of one laptop per child as a general company or idea. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, and we talk a lot about the idea that, you know, a laptop or device, it's got to at least be able to last all day for a student. Well,
yeah.
A little trickle charge from a solar panel might just give you that extra boost you need. And, you know, besides, why should students have to be plugging in or using even more power than we already do in our schools, no matter how low power your device is?
Maybe some manual power you could also charge it.
We have this obesity problem here in the States, you know. Let's get kids cranking their laptops. I'd probably lose some weight myself. Yeah, exactly. So, excuse me. Interesting design thoughts. Interesting developments as we kind of take this whole hardware content ecosystem talk forward.
I think we can wrap this up. We have one more story. Newton got a nice feature on Forbes, so also showing what an educational company or that education is attractive in various ways, and even that the CEO is featured on such a Forbes magazine, normally standing for mainstream business, powerful people. Now education is becoming somewhat, what I said last week, sexy, attractive to write about, to interview influential people, leaders, if you will, in education. So I put this in the show notes if you want. They got a nice feature. Some other players about the changing education, new education are also mentioned. But yeah, definitely nice article for Newton.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Then what are you up to today? Some more stories to come, or are you collecting for next week already?
I'm doing a little bit of both. I'm not sure what will end up this weekend. If I don't get a couple chapters done on that book for Cengage, I think my editors will come break my kneecaps. So I probably better focus on that. It's been a holiday week here for the kids, so it's not been as productive as it should be. So
was President's Day.
Yeah, President's Day, and they turned into winter break out here in the cold Arctic North. So so I need to refocus this weekend. But early this week, I did write that article I mentioned on Christopson founded a startup, and it gets back to this idea that now is the time for educators. If you have an idea, there's certainly money around. You just need a business plan to go with it. And I've gotten some great feedback on the article, and I think it's going to turn into a full-blown business plan. Nothing I'll actually do anything with unless someone wants to throw some money my way. But, I think it's an interesting exercise to go through to think about, we went through the dot-com bubble already, and some great stuff came out of that, but 95% of it was junk without any business plan. The same needs to not happen with these educational businesses. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. It's also budget season for schools as they kind of figure out how to spend their money in FY13. So I'm going to be focusing a little bit early next week on exactly what should be on schools' radars and what should be on the radars of the people who sell to schools. What should they be focusing on?
Excellent. For myself, as I mentioned, there is this new post on Disrupt Education over at Big Think about Pearson and whether it might be an attractive idea to build their own tablet. Otherwise, yeah, I also have to see if I come up with a new article this weekend. Well, I guess if you want to get in touch with Chris, you can always reach out on Twitter. That's at Mr. Data HS. You have to explain one day how you found this name.
Definitely.
And for me, that's either me personally at Kirsten Winkler or, of course, our review ad show you find under at EduQuest as well.
Very good.
Thank you so much. Was
My pleasure as always.
An interesting and stimulating discussion as always. And good luck and progress with the book. When do you have to deliver?
Oh, several weeks ago. So yeah, it's one of these projects that's been languishing for a while, and it's finally just gotta crank it out. So I'm getting there, but gotta make it happen.
And then we have something to announce here on
exactly.
one of the next shows. All right,
I hope so.
Thanks so much, and then good continuation.
Talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Bye bye.
Great. Bye.